The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm breaking over calm waters, and the 40 warships immediately began forming into attack patterns that the Dravik had never seen before. Captain Sam Mercer stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the tactical display with calm focus as the enemy hive fleet came into view. 200,000 Dravik warriors spread across hundreds of organic ships, their vessels pulsing with dark life as they moved toward Kethros Station. "All ships report ready, Captain," Commander Kate Holloway announced from her station. Sam nodded without taking his eyes off the display. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We are not here to defend. We are here to attack, so all ships will advance at maximum speed and engage the enemy at close range." The bridge crew exchanged glances because what the captain was suggesting went against every principle of defensive warfare. Danny Vance stood near the weapons station, with his arms crossed, grinning like a wolf who had just spotted easy prey. "You heard the man," he said to the crew. "Let us show these bugs what humans do to things that threaten innocent people." The horizon's edge surged forward, and the rest of the fleet followed. On Kethros Station, Commander Vela watched the battle unfold with a mixture of terror and awe. She had expected the humans to form a defensive line around the station, buying time for evacuations while slowly being pushed back. Instead, they were charging directly at an enemy force that outnumbered them by thousands to one. "They are insane," Oryx whispered beside her. "They will be slaughtered." But as the two forces met, something unexpected happened. The human ships did not slow down or try to maintain distance. They plunged straight into the heart of the Dravik formation, weaving between enemy vessels with impossible precision. Lieutenant Ben Torres piloted the Horizon's Edge through gaps that should not have existed, spinning and rolling to avoid collisions while keeping the ship's weapons trained on target after target. "Firing main batteries," the weapons officer called out. The ship shuddered as massive cannons unleashed streams of energy into the surrounding Dravik vessels. Explosions bloomed across the tactical display as enemy ships were torn apart. On other human vessels, similar scenes played out. The destroyer Nightfall carved through a cluster of Dravik carriers, leaving nothing but debris in its wake. The cruiser Iron Resolve absorbed hit after hit from enemy weapons, while returning fire with devastating accuracy. The frigate Swift Justice darted between larger ships, targeting weak points that the Dravik did not even know they had. Chief Engineer Megan Price worked frantically in the engine room of the Horizon's Edge, keeping the power flowing despite damage that would have crippled any Confederacy vessel. "I need more power to forward shields," she shouted to her team. "We are already at 120% capacity," one of her engineers yelled back. Megan wiped sweat from her forehead and made a decision. "Then push it to 150, because the captain needs those shields, and I will not be the one to let him down." The engines screamed in protest, but they held. On the station, the situation was growing desperate. Dravik boarding pods had breached the outer sections, and thousands of insectoid warriors were pouring into the corridors. The station's security forces were overwhelmed within minutes, falling back toward the civilian shelters. Then the human Marines arrived. Major Laura Chen led the first wave through the airlock, her powered armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Behind her came 200 of the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced, each one carrying enough firepower to level a building. "All units spread out and establish defensive positions," she commanded over the radio. "We hold here until every civilian is evacuated." Private First Class Tyler Brooks was the first to encounter the Dravik face-to-face. The creatures were horrifying, standing over 2 meters tall, with razor-sharp limbs and mandibles that could cut through steel. But Tyler did not hesitate. He raised his rifle and started firing, dropping the first 3 Dravik before they could even react. "Contact front," he shouted, engaging hostiles. Corporal Ashley Grant moved up beside him, tossing grenades into the advancing swarm. The explosions created a wall of fire that forced the Dravek back. "Keep pushing," she yelled. "Do not give them room to regroup." Medic Chris Dunham worked behind the front lines, dragging wounded Marines to safety and patching their injuries with quick efficiency. Threw the line and lunged at him, but Chris drew his sidearm and put 3 rounds through its head without missing a beat. Then he went right back to treating his patient. "You are going to be fine, soldier," he said calmly. "Just a scratch." The Marine looked down at the jagged wound in his side and laughed despite the pain. "If this is a scratch, I would hate to see what you consider a real injury." Back in space, the battle had become a chaotic swirl of fire and death. The human fleet had broken the Dravek formation into pieces, hunting down isolated groups and destroying them with ruthless efficiency. But the swarm was adapting, and more ships were arriving every minute. "Captain, we have enemy reinforcements jumping in from Sector 7, Kate reported. Sam studied the display and made a quick calculation. Signal the Iron Resolve and the Nightfall to intercept, and have the rest of the fleet continue their attack. "We are taking heavy damage on the port side," another officer called out. "Reroute power from non-essential systems and keep firing." Gunnery Sergeant Nick Reyes worked his weapons console with the focus of a master artist, selecting targets and firing with perfect timing. Every shot he took found its mark, and every mark he hit exploded. "That is 57 confirmed kills," he muttered to himself. "Come on, give me an even 60. A Dravik carrier tried to ram the Horizon's edge, but Ben Torres saw it coming and spun the ship out of the way at the last possible second. Nick fired a full spread into the carrier's exposed flank, and it detonated in a massive fireball. 60, he said with satisfaction. The battle raged for 18 hours. 18 hours of constant fighting, constant death, constant impossible victories. When it was finally over, the Dravik hive fleet had been completely destroyed. 1,000 warriors reduced to floating debris. On Kethros Station, the last of the civilians were loaded onto evacuation ships. Major Chen stood at the airlock, watching them go with tired eyes. She had lost 43 Marines in the fighting, and each death weighed on her soul. But 3 million people were alive because of their sacrifice. Captain Mercer's voice came over the communication system. "Station Kethros, this is the Horizon's Edge. The area is secure, and all enemy forces have been eliminated." Commander Vela responded with a voice that trembled slightly. "Captain Mercer, I do not know how to thank you, because what you have done today is beyond anything I thought possible." Sam's reply was simple. "You do not need to thank us, Commander. Just remember what you saw here, and tell the Confederacy that humanity is ready to fight." He paused for a moment. "Tell them the myths are real, and we are just getting started." Started, P. The Dravek homeworld hung in space like a festering wound, covered in organic structures that pulsed with dark energy and surrounded by swarms of patrol ships that numbered in the millions. Sam Mercer studied it through the viewport of the stealth transport and felt a cold determination settle into his bones. Somewhere beneath that twisted surface, the Queen waited. "Approaching the outer defense perimeter," the pilot announced quietly. Everyone on the transport tensed, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether they lived or died. Lieutenant Navarro activated his disruption equipment, sending out carefully tuned frequencies that created small blind spots in the Dravek sensor network. The transport slipped through the gaps like a ghost, moving closer and closer to the planet below. They made it through the orbital defenses without being detected, and the pilot brought them down through the atmosphere toward a landing zone that their mission would require. Intelligence suggested was lightly guarded. 30 seconds to touchdown, he said. Sam checked his weapons one final time and looked at his team. Kate Holloway met his gaze with steady confidence. Danny Vance cracked his knuckles with barely contained excitement. Nicole Vega's eyes were cold and focused. Commander Vela gripped her rifle with hands that trembled slightly but did not waver. These were the people who had chosen to follow him into the heart of darkness, and he would die before he let them down. The transport landed with a gentle thump, and the team moved out. The surface of the Dravek world was nightmare made real. Organic towers rose toward the sky, connected by bridges of hardened flesh. Rivers of thick liquid flowed between the structures, carrying nutrients to every part of the hive. The air smelled of decay and alien chemicals, and strange sounds echoed from every direction. Approximately 12 kilometers underground, Navarro whispered, checking his scanner. There is an access tunnel about 500 meters north of our position. Sam nodded and signaled for the team to move. They traveled in silence, avoiding Dravik patrols with careful precision. Several times they had to hide as massive warrior drones passed nearby, their razor limbs clicking against the organic ground. Each time, Sam held his breath and prayed they would not be discovered. They reached the tunnel entrance without incident, but their luck could not last forever. A Dravik scout spotted them as they descended into the darkness, and it let out a piercing shriek before Danny put 3 rounds through its head. "We have been made," Kate said grimly. "They know we are here." "Then we move fast," Sam replied, breaking into a run. The tunnels were a maze of twisting passages and dead ends, but Navarro's equipment guided them toward the Queen. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of pursuit, thousands of warriors converging on their position. Nicole Vega dropped back to slow them down, setting traps and creating choke points that forced the Dravik to funnel through narrow passages. Each explosion bought the team precious seconds, but the enemy kept coming. They lost their first soldier in a chamber where tunnels crossed. A swarm of warriors burst from a side passage, overwhelming a young Marine named Derek Hayes before anyone could react. Kate screamed his name and fired into the mass of bodies, but it was already too late. "Keep moving," Sam ordered, his voice rough with grief. "We cannot stop." They pressed on, fighting through wave after wave of defenders. Danny Vance became a one-man army, his massive weapon cutting down everything that came near. Vela fought beside him, her alien reflexes proving just as deadly as human training. More soldiers fell as they descended deeper into the hive. Each death weighed on Sam's soul, but he could not afford to stop. The Queen was close now, her psychic presence pressing against his mind like a hand trying to crush his skull. "She knows we are coming," Navarro gasped, blood dripping from his nose. "She is trying to break our minds." "Let her try," Sam growled, pushing through the mental assault with pure willpower. They burst through a final barrier and found themselves in an enormous chamber. The Queen was waiting for them. She was massive, easily 50 meters long, her body a twisted combination of insect and nightmare. Thousands of eyes covered her head, and her mind radiated power that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Half the Strike team collapsed the moment they entered, their minds overwhelmed by her psychic attack. Confederacy soldiers fell to their knees, screaming as their thoughts were torn apart. Standing, Sam felt the Queen's power crash against him like a tidal wave, trying to drown his consciousness in an ocean of alien thoughts. He staggered, but did not fall. Beside him, Kate groaned with pain, but raised her weapon anyway. Danny roared in defiance and charged forward. The Queen seemed surprised. She had broken billions of minds across thousands of worlds, but these small creatures refused to submit. She redoubled her efforts, pouring more and more power into her attack. Sam felt blood running from his ears and tasted copper on his tongue. His vision blurred, and his legs threatened to buckle, but he kept walking. Step by step, he moved toward the Queen, carrying the explosive charges that would end her existence. Kate covered him, firing at the warriors that tried to intercept. Danny carved a path through the defenders, laughing like a madman as he fought. Nicole appeared from somewhere, her armor cracked, and her face bloody, but still firing. Even Vela managed to rise, her alien mind partially shielded by the humans around her. "You cannot stop me," the Queen's voice thundered in their minds. "I have consumed galaxies and broken gods, and you are nothing but insects before my power." Sam reached the base of her massive body and looked up at her countless eyes. "Maybe we are insects," he said through gritted teeth, "but insects can still bite." He armed the charges and drove them deep into her flesh. The Queen screamed, a sound that echoed across the entire planet. She lashed out with her limbs, catching Sam across the chest and sending him flying. Kate was there instantly, dragging him toward the exit, while Danny and Nicole held off the frantic warriors. "Everyone out!" Kate shouted. "Move, move, move!" They ran through the tunnels, carrying their wounded and leaving their dead behind. The explosion that followed shook the entire planet. Deep beneath the surface, the Dravek Queen died in a ball of fire, and across the galaxy, 5 billion warriors suddenly went silent. The hive-mind connection was severed, leaving the Dravek confused and leaderless. Within hours, they began turning on each other, their coordination completely destroyed. The war was over. 3 months later, the Galactic Confederacy held a ceremony to celebrate their victory. Representatives from every species gathered on a space station built for the occasion, and the humans stood at the center of attention. Admiral Patterson accepted a medal on behalf of Earth, his face humble despite the honor. Captain Sam Mercer stood behind him, his chest still bandaged from his injuries. Kate Holloway was at his side, as always. Danny Vance wore a suit for the first time in his life, and complained about it constantly. Nicole Vega stood apart, quietly mourning the soldiers who had not returned. Commander Vela, now High Admiral of the Confederacy Fleet, gave the final speech. 3,000 years ago, the galaxy forgot about humanity, she said. We told stories about them as if they were monsters, myths, creatures from nightmares. But we were wrong. She looked at Sam and smiled. Humans are not monsters. They are heroes, and today we welcome them not as legends or myths, but as friends, allies, and family. The applause lasted for what felt like hours. Later, Sam found himself standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Kate joined him, as he knew she would. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Sam was quiet for a moment. "I am thinking about everyone we lost, and wondering if it was worth it." Kate took his hand. "It was worth it, Sam, because billions of people are alive who would have been dead, and the galaxy is finally at peace." Gently. "The dead would not want you to carry guilt. They would want you to live, and that is exactly what you should do." Sam nodded slowly. "You are right, as usual." "I am always right. You should know that by now." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars that humanity had finally claimed as their own. Behind them, the sounds of celebration continued. Species that had been enemies for centuries were laughing together. Children who had been born during the war were seeing peace for the first time. And somewhere out there, on a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy, humanity looked up at the sky and knew that they were no longer alone. The myths had become reality, the legends had become truth, and the humans who had once been forgotten would never be forgotten again. They had claimed their place among the stars, not through conquest or domination, but through sacrifice and courage, and an unwavering determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. That was what it meant to be human. That was why they had survived. And that was why the galaxy would never forget them again. News of the Battle of Kethros spread through the galaxy like wildfire. And within days, every species in the Confederacy was talking about the humans who had come from nowhere to save 3 million lives. Commander Vela presented her report to the Confederacy Council, showing them footage of the battle that made even the most skeptical politicians go silent. They watched human ships charge into overwhelming odds without hesitation. They watched human soldiers hold the line against thousands of Dravik warriors. They watched the impossible become possible. And when the footage ended, no one had any arguments left. The alliance was approved unanimously. Admiral Greg Patterson arrived from Earth with the main battle fleet 3 weeks later, bringing with him over 500 warships and 200,000 ground troops. He was an older man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a seasoned commander, someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The Earth Defense Coalition is honored to stand with the Galactic Confederacy, he announced at the formal ceremony, and we pledge our full commitment to defeating the Dravik swarm. Captain Sam Mercer stood in the crowd, watching the proceedings with mixed feelings. He was glad that humanity had finally taken its place among the stars, but he knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. Kate Holloway appeared beside him, looking just as tired as he felt. "You should be up there getting medals," she said quietly. Sam shook his head. "I did not do this for medals, Kate. I did it because it was the right thing to do." She smiled and bumped her shoulder against his. "That is exactly why you should be getting medals, you idiot." The alliance changed everything. Human tactics and technology spread through the Confederacy forces, and suddenly battles that had seemed hopeless became winnable. Commander Nicole Vega became famous for her boarding operations, leading teams of Marines directly into Dravik hive ships and destroying them from the inside. She was small and fierce, with a reputation for never leaving a soldier behind. Lieutenant Paul Navarro developed new methods for disrupting the Dravik hive mind, using specialized frequencies that created confusion in their ranks. His techniques saved countless lives and turned the tide of dozens of engagements. Dr. Hannah Cole worked tirelessly in her laboratory, studying Dravik biology until she discovered a critical weakness in their armor. A specific chemical compound could dissolve their carapace in seconds, and within months, every human soldier was equipped with weapons that used it. The swarm began to retreat for the first time in centuries. Worlds that had been occupied were liberated one by one. Species that had been ready to surrender found new courage, joined the fight. But everyone knew that these victories were only temporary. As long as the Dravik Queen lived, the swarm would keep coming back. She could produce millions of new warriors every year, replenishing her losses faster than the Alliance could inflict them. The only way to end the war permanently was to find her and kill her. Admiral Patterson called a meeting of the highest-ranking officers to discuss the problem. They gathered in a secure conference room aboard his flagship, the Liberty's Call, and studied everything they knew about the Queen. "She is hidden somewhere in the core territories," Admiral Patterson explained, gesturing at a holographic map, protected by the largest concentration of Dravik forces in the galaxy. "How many?" someone asked. Conservative estimates put it at over 5 billion warriors, not counting the orbital defenses and ground installations. The room went quiet as everyone processed that. Even with all their victories, the Alliance could not hope to fight through 5 billion enemies. Sam Mercer leaned forward and studied the map closely. "What about a surgical strike?" he asked. "A small team that could slip past the defenses and reach the Queen directly." Admiral Patterson shook his head. "We have considered that option, but the Queen's psychic abilities make it nearly impossible, because she can sense any threat that comes near her." "Nearly impossible is not the same as impossible," Sam pointed out. Kate Holloway understood what he was thinking. "You want to lead a strike team," she said flatly, "into the heart of enemy territory, against billions of warriors, to kill a creature that can read minds." Sam met her gaze steadily. "Someone has to do it, and I would rather it be me than someone else." Danny Vance grinned from his seat across the table. "If you think you are going without me, Captain," he said, "you have lost your mind. Nicole Vega nodded in agreement. Count me in as well, because I have been waiting my whole life for a mission like this. One by one, others volunteered. Lieutenant Navarro offered his expertise in disrupting the hive mind. Dr. Cole said she would prepare special weapons for the assault. Even Commander Vela stepped forward, saying that she wanted to be there when the creature who destroyed her homeworld finally died. Admiral Patterson looked at the volunteers and sighed. "You are all insane," he said, "but I suppose that is what makes you human." He turned to Sam. "Captain Mercer, you will lead this mission, and I am giving you full authority to plan it however you see fit." Sam nodded and stood up. "Then we better get started, because we have a queen to kill." The planning took weeks. They studied every piece of intelligence they could find about the Dravik core territories, ran simulations and practiced tactics until every team member could perform their role in their sleep. They gathered equipment and supplies, preparing for a mission that might take months or might end in seconds. Through it all, Sam pushed himself harder than anyone. He spent long nights staring at maps and reports, looking for any weakness they could exploit. Kate found him one night, sitting alone in the observation deck, watching the stars. "You need to sleep," she said, sitting down beside him. "I will sleep when the queen is dead." Kate was quiet for a moment. "You know this might be a one-way trip." Sam nodded slowly. "I know, but if we succeed, then every death will mean something. And if we fail, then at least we tried." He turned to look at her. "Are you having second thoughts?" Kate laughed softly. "I had second thoughts the moment you volunteered, but that does not mean I'm going to let you go alone." She reached out and took his hand. "We started this together, Sam, and we will finish it together, no matter what happens." Sam squeezed her hand and smiled. "Thank you, Kate, for everything." The day of departure arrived, and the strike team gathered in the hangar bay of the Liberty's Call. 50 volunteers from multiple species stood ready, wearing the best armor and carrying the most advanced weapons the Alliance could provide. Admiral Patterson came to see them off. "The entire galaxy is counting on you," he said simply, "so try not to let us down." Sam saluted crisply. "We will do our best, Admiral." Patterson returned the salute. "I know you will, Captain, because that is what humans do." The strike team boarded their stealth transport and disappeared into hyperspace. Behind them, the Alliance fleet began massing for the largest offensive in galactic history. The final battle was about to begin. The diplomatic shuttle descended through the clouds of Earth, and Commander Vela pressed her face against the viewport like a child seeing the stars for the first time. The planet was even more beautiful up close, with rolling mountains and vast plains covered in green vegetation. She could see cities scattered across the continents, tall buildings that reached toward the sky, and roads that connected them like veins in a living body. Oryx sat beside her, clutching his safety harness with all 4 hands, and making small whimpering sounds. "This cannot be real," he muttered. "The humans were supposed to be extinct, and yet here we are landing on their homeworld." Vela did not respond, because she was too busy trying to process what she was seeing. The shuttle touched down on a landing platform outside a massive military complex, and when the doors opened, Vela was greeted by a wall of humid air that smelled of salt and growing things. Humans waited for them at the bottom of the ramp. At the front stood Admiral Dunn, wearing a crisp uniform decorated with medals and insignia that Vela did not recognize. Beside her was a man with broad shoulders and a friendly smile that somehow made him seem both welcoming and dangerous at the same time. "Commander Vela," Admiral Dunn said, "allow me to introduce Captain Sam Mercer, commanding officer of the assault carrier Horizon's Edge." The man stepped forward and extended his hand, which Vela had learned was a human greeting ritual. She took it carefully, surprised by the warmth of his skin and the strength of his grip. "It is an honor to meet you, Captain," she said. Sam Mercer's smile widened. The honor is ours, Commander, because we have been waiting 3,000 years to meet our galactic neighbors, and I have to say that you are much more impressive in person than in the old records. Vela was not sure how to respond to that, so she simply nodded. Admiral Dunn led them inside the complex, where they were taken to a large conference room filled with screens and holographic displays. More humans waited for them there, including a woman with sharp eyes and red hair who was introduced as Commander Kate Holloway, and a massive man with arms like tree trunks who answered to the name Danny Vance. "We have been monitoring the war against the Dravek swarm," Admiral Dunn began, activating a holographic map of the galaxy, "and we have identified several critical weaknesses in their strategy." Vela leaned forward with interest as the Admiral began explaining. The Dravek swarm was a hive mind species, controlled by a single queen who directed the actions of billions of warriors. When the queen gave an order, every Dravek in the galaxy responded instantly, which made them incredibly coordinated and difficult to defeat. But it also meant that if the queen was killed, the entire swarm would collapse. "We have known this for centuries," Vela said with frustration, "but no one has ever been able to locate the queen, and even if we could find her, her defenses are too strong for any fleet to penetrate." Captain Mercer exchanged a glance with Commander Holloway, and something unspoken passed between them. "That is where we come in," he said, pulling up new data on the display, "because humans are very good at doing things that other species consider impossible." He showed her the specifications for human weapons and ships, and Vela felt her blood run cold. The humans had spent 3,000 years preparing for war, developing technologies that the Confederacy had never even imagined. Their ships were faster and tougher than anything in the galactic fleet. Their weapons could punch through Dravek armor like it was paper. And their soldiers were equipped with powered armor that turned them into walking tanks. "This possible?" Orcs squeaked, staring at the data with wide eyes. "Your species was supposed to be primitive, barely capable of reaching your own moon." Danny Vance laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the room. "That was 3,000 years ago, friend, and humans do not stay primitive for long, because we have this annoying habit of always wanting to be better than we were yesterday." Commander Holloway stepped forward, her expression serious. "We have also developed tactics specifically designed to counter the Dravek hive mind," she explained. "Because our researchers discovered that the psychic connection between the queen and her warriors can be disrupted by certain frequencies, which creates windows of confusion that skilled soldiers can exploit." Vela felt something she had not felt in a very long time, and it took her a moment to recognize it as hope. "You truly believe you can help us win this war?" she asked. Met her gaze with steady confidence. "Commander, humanity nearly destroyed itself in our past, and we learned hard lessons from that experience. So when we began rebuilding, we swore that we would never again be helpless against any threat." She gestured at the screens around them, showing images of human fleets and armies and weapons. "Everything we have built in the last 3,000 years has been designed with one purpose in mind, which is to protect not just our own world, but any world that needs protecting." Captain Mercer stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sky. "The Confederacy thought we were myths," he said quietly. "Stories to scare children and entertain spacers. But myths do not build starships, and legends do not forge weapons." He turned back to face Vela. "We are real, Commander, and we are ready to fight. So the only question is whether you will let us." Vela thought about her homeworld, now occupied by Dravek forces. She thought about the billions who had died, while the Confederacy debated and negotiated and retreated. She thought about the hopelessness that had settled over the galaxy like a thick fog. And then she looked at these humans, these small and soft creatures, who spoke of impossible things with absolute certainty. "The Confederacy Council will need to approve any alliance," she said slowly, "but I can offer you something right now." "What is that?" Admiral Dunn asked. Vela straightened her spine, and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. There is a station called Kethros in the Outer Rim territories, and it is currently under siege by a Dravek hive fleet, with over 200,000 warriors closing in on a civilian population of 3 million. She looked directly at Captain Mercer. The Confederacy has written them off as lost, but if you want to prove what humanity can do, then Kethros is yours. Sam Mercer smiled, and this time there was nothing friendly about it. How long do we have? 6 days before the Dravek reached the station. The captain turned to his officers. Kate, get the fleet ready to move, and Danny, I want every Marine we have armed and prepared for close combat. He looked back at Vela with fire in his eyes. Tell your council that the myths are coming, Commander, and the Dravek are about to learn why humanity was never meant to be forgotten. The galaxy had forgotten about Earth a long time ago, and most species believed that humans were nothing more than old stories told by drunk spacers in dirty cantinas on the edge of civilized space. Commander Vela of the Talnori Imperial Fleet stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the latest battle reports scroll across her screen. And what she saw made her stomach turn with dread. The Dravek swarm had taken another colony world, and this time they had consumed nearly 8 billion souls before the Confederacy could even respond. She turned away from the screen and looked out at the stars, wondering how much longer the galaxy could survive against an enemy that seemed to have no end. Her second-in-command, a thin and nervous Kelthian named Oryx, approached her with a data tablet clutched in his 4-fingered hands. Commander, we have received a strange transmission from an uncharted system in the outer territories, he said in his high-pitched voice. Vela took the tablet and frowned at the coordinates, because she did not recognize them at all. What kind of transmission? She asked. Oryx shifted his weight from one leg to another, which was a sign that he was uncomfortable. It appears to be a communication signal using frequencies that our species abandoned over 300 years ago, and the language is unlike anything in our current databases. Vela played the recording, and a voice filled the bridge. It was deep and confident, speaking in a tongue that the ship's computer struggled to translate. This is Captain Sam Mercer of the Earth Defense Coalition, the voice said, and we have been watching your war against the Dravek swarm for quite some time now. So we are reaching out to offer our assistance, because we believe it is time for humanity to return to the stars. The bridge went completely silent. Oryx made a choking sound and grabbed the railing for support. Commander, did that transmission say humanity? He whispered. Vela played it again to make sure she had heard correctly, and the words remained the same. Humanity. Earth. These were names from ancient legends, stories that parents told their children to frighten them into behaving. The humans were supposed to be a species so violent and destructive that they had burned their own planet to ashes in a great nuclear war. Every civilization in the Confederacy knew the tale of Earth, the world of warriors who had fought each other for resources until nothing remained. Vela had always assumed it was just a myth, a cautionary story about the dangers of aggression and war. But now she held a tablet with coordinates to a planet that should not exist, broadcasting a message from a species that should have been dead for thousands of years. What should we do, Commander? Oryx asked. Vela thought about it for a long moment. The Confederacy was losing the war against the Dravek, and every day brought news of more defeats and more deaths. They needed help from somewhere, and if these so-called humans were real and willing to fight, then perhaps it was worth the risk. Set a course for these coordinates, she ordered, and prepare a diplomatic shuttle for first contact. Oryx looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better than to question his commander in front of the crew. The journey took 3 standard days, and during that time, Vela studied everything the Confederacy archives had on the humans. Most of it was legend and rumor, stories passed down through generations of spacefaring species. The humans were described as small and weak compared to most galactic races, with soft skin and fragile bones. But the stories also spoke of their incredible endurance, their ability to survive injuries that would kill other species, and their strange tendency to form emotional bonds with anything they encountered. One ancient text described humans as persistent predators, creatures who would chase their prey across vast distances until the prey simply collapsed from exhaustion. Another story told of human soldiers who continued fighting even after losing limbs, refusing to stop until their hearts gave out. Vela did not know how much of this was true, but she found herself both fascinated and disturbed by what she read. When her fleet finally arrived at the coordinates, she was surprised by what she found. The planet was indeed blue and green, covered in vast oceans and dense forests. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache, because it reminded her of her own homeworld before the Dravik had touched it. But what truly caught her attention were the ships. Hundreds of vessels orbited the planet, and they were unlike anything she had ever seen. They were angular and aggressive, covered in dinosaurs, weapons, and armor plating. They looked like they had been built for one purpose and one purpose only, which was war. A communication request came through almost immediately. Talnori vessel, this is Earth Defense Station Alpha, a female voice said. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Vela straightened her uniform and activated the visual communication channel. I am Commander Vela of the Talnori Imperial Fleet, representing the Galactic Confederacy, and I am here in response to your transmission. There was a pause, and then the screen flickered to life. The human who appeared was female, with dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that seemed to analyze everything they saw. I am Admiral Patricia Dunn of the Earth Defense Coalition, the human said, and we have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. So welcome to Earth, Commander. Vela felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the. There was something in those eyes that spoke of old pain and hard-won wisdom. Something that said this species had seen the worst of what the universe had to offer and had survived anyway. We received your offer of assistance, Vela said carefully, but I must ask why you would help us when the Confederacy has done nothing for your people. Admiral Dunn smiled, and it was not a warm expression. We have been rebuilding for 3,000 years, Commander, hiding in this corner of the galaxy while we recovered from our own stupidity. And during that time we have watched the stars and learned about the species that call themselves civilized. She leaned forward, and her voice grew harder. We watched the Dravik swarm begin their conquest, and we watched the Confederacy fail to stop them. And we decided that it was time to stop hiding. But why fight for us? Vela pressed. The Admiral's expression softened just slightly. Because someone has to stand against the darkness, Commander, and humans have always been good at standing when others fall. So if you will accept our help, we will show you what humanity can do. Vela looked at Oryx, who seemed ready to faint from shock. She looked at her crew, who were staring at the screen with a mixture of fear and hope. And then she looked back at Admiral Patricia Dunn, this small and soft-skinned creature, who spoke of fighting an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. We accept, Vela said. The Admiral nodded. Then let us begin.